is, guys? We're BlastphamousHD. I really hope we're not fucking up right now, man. As you can already see, it's kind of dark. Actually, it is nighttime. I'll probably feel better if I close the door. We're about to watch 4 disturbing true dates from hell. Make me feel more secure in this bitch. The link to the original video is in the description down below. Lego! We're already in it. Fuck it, why not? Oh, damn it. Fucking scary ass music. What the fuck is that?
Number 1. 2 years ago, my life was completely different. I was in a sorority. I had a lot of friends. I was outgoing. That was until the night of our Halloween grab-a-date. For those of you who have never been in the Greek system, it's a party where you invite only one person as your date. I had recently met a gorgeous guy who was on my college's football team. I invited him, and he said yes, but that his friend from out of town had to go too. I convinced the naive freshman to take him. On the afternoon of the date, there was a football game, so, unlike the majority of girls and their dates, I had to wait for my date instead of getting drunk. The game ended with just enough time to take a shot of vodka with my date and the 2 other guys, before we had to rush for a bus to meet the freshman and go to a boat, where the party would be held. I ended up finding my date and his friend rather creepy whilst on the boat, and ignored him for most of the night and danced with my friends. Unfortunately, my keys were at his apartment, so after we got off the boat and back to the Greek system, I had to return to his place.
Fucking up.
This is where things went wrong. I quickly went back to his place and grabbed my keys, but by the time that I found them, he had poured a shot for each of us. By this point, it was just me, his friend, and him. I at first declined, but they insisted I take it before I leave. I don't remember anything after that shot. The grab-a-date was on October 30th. Halloween morning, I wake up to a strange beeping. I was extremely confused and had no idea where I was, but I was terrified. I felt too weak to move, and after a few minutes, I realized that the beeping was coming from a machine that I was attached to.
Oh no.
Even then, I didn't realize where I was. I just started yelling. After what seemed like an eternity, a grumpy nurse walked in. I asked her for a phone, which she gave me and left. In my confusion, I couldn't figure out how the phone worked, so I had to yell for her to come back. Eventually it was figured out, and I called my dad. This was the scariest Halloween for my dad. Waking up early from an unknown caller. That ended up being his daughter, 2 hours away, in the ER. After that phone call, I fell asleep, and woke up to my dad in the room, crying. It turned out that I had stopped breathing a few times that night. The first time was within half an hour of taking the shot. I later found out that, rather than calling for help, the guy left my body on the steps of my sorority, where, thankfully, another girl was coming home while he was walking away. She was the only one who called the ambulance. Unfortunately, I did not get tested. In my confusion, I refused to be drugs tested that morning, and kept insisting that I wanted to go home. Too weak to walk, I had to be wheelchaired out, and then carried to my dad's car. My dad's partner works in the ER, and said that it sounded like I had an allergic reaction to roofies. One of my mum's friends from a hospital suggested that as well, but by the time I wanted to be checked, the hospital said it would already be out of my system. Later that day, I looked through my cell phone and found that I had been texting a few friends that night for help, saying that I was creeped out and that I was scared. I had also received a text from the guy, saying he wanted me to go to the bathroom and give him head. I decided to reply to his text and ask him what happened that night, and told him that I'd woken up in hospital. He replied with, "That sucks." As if this whole ordeal wasn't enough, After a few days when I returned to school and sorority, a rumour had started that I had had alcohol poisoning. When I tried claiming that wasn't what happened, people just told me I was too embarrassed to admit it. I was even sent to standards, a sort of sorority court where you get punished, and told I wasn't allowed to go to another grab-a-date that quarter. Very few girls asked if I was okay. I wasn't. Number 2.
Damn!
I'm a woman, and I met a guy on Match.com, which I joined as an attempt to tiptoe back into dating after a very painful divorce. He sent me a message saying my profile was intriguing and he would love a shot at meeting me.
You know what's fucked up? Okay, these stories wouldn't be nowhere near, I'm talking at least 70% less scary if they wouldn't have these goddamn fucked up ass pictures in the background and this scary ass ambiance music in the damn headphones, okay? I've been looking around me this entire damn time, man. This shit is too well done. Shit! Lego.
I looked over his profile and quickly deduced that he wasn't a match. He had written a long message about his passion for football and annoyance with women who didn't understand, and he claimed to be a devoted Christian and a staunch conservative. I'm neither of these and don't much enjoy hearing about either. I politely declined his request for a meeting, and this seemed to only egg him on. I'd say, "I don't meet any of your clearly articulated criteria," to which he'd reply, "Maybe you're worth opening my mind a bit." We went back and forth for a week or two with me insisting we weren't right for each other and him playfully arguing that I was too interesting for him to let me get away. He said he'd become accustomed to women throwing themselves at him. Apparently he's some sort of successful business owner and semi-pro ball player. And he found my reluctance sexy and endearing. I'll admit, I was flattered by his persistence and impressed by his confidence. So I finally agreed to meet at a restaurant for dinner.
That's how they get you.
He was decent looking, although a big hulk of a fellow, and he came across as intelligent, witty, and confident in person. He said he was recently divorced and had a 3-year-old daughter. He seemed nice enough, but I really wasn't feeling a spark, and after a couple of hours began to find his self-assurance somewhat obnoxious. For reasons I still don't quite understand, I nevertheless agreed to join him for ice cream after our meal, and accepted his offer to drive. We live near the coast, and somehow he talked me into pulling into a parking lot near a public beach to chat and finish our ice cream.
Really?
Although I didn't really think it would work, I let him kiss me. What can I say? It had been a while. And when it got a little too hot and heavy, I stopped it and said I was ready to head back to my car. He started whining and begging me for sex, saying that I couldn't just leave him turned on like that. At first I laughed it off, but he grew increasingly desperate, telling me he was about to explode. "Can't you just suck it or at least give me a hand job?"
We've all used those ones. Probably gonna edit that out.
No, I said. "I think it's time to go. Now." He got all frustrated and annoyed, like he was offended that I'd been willing to kiss but unwilling to fuck him, and I started to get pretty nervous. That's when he whipped it out of his pants and proceeded to masturbate, right there in the driver's seat. I was too relieved that this massive dude hadn't tried to rape me to feel scared, and I had to force myself to look away, trapped in a combination of absolute horror and fascination. He sat there stroking away enthusiastically, moaning about how good it felt while I pressed myself against the passenger door, trying to stay as far away as possible and looking around for potential help in case things got any worse. When he was almost finished, he said in a breathless voice, "Where do you want me to put it?" When I didn't respond, he continued, "Where should I come? Can I put it on your tits, or can I at least give me your hand?" I ignored him, so he let it loose all over the steering wheel of his truck. "Oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed," he said. "I can't believe I just did that, but you are so sexy I couldn't help it." Then he casually asked me to pass him a napkin from the glove box so he could clean up his mess. I probably should have just run away, but the empty beach at night seemed more dangerous than this now spent perv, so I let him take me back to my car. He acted like nothing strange had happened and told me he had a great time. As soon as I saw my car, I ran without even looking back and went home and showered. He actually sent me another message asking for another shot. I disabled my Match.com account and basically disappeared from the cyber universe for months. Technically, I think it probably qualified as some sort of sexual assault, but after telling the story of the master data to my friends over and over, I had laughed too much to feel traumatized. A few months later, I was eating pancakes at IHOP with my new boyfriend, now husband, and I spotted the master data eating with a woman and a 3-year-old girl. Both of them were wearing wedding rings, and from the look of panic on his face when he briefly made eye contact, I feel pretty sure he was married the entire time we corresponded. After what I'd let him get away with, I was very tempted to go over and ask him if he's whacked off on any first dates lately. If only the kid hadn't been there.
Damn. Dude, like, it's so freaking hilarious because that story wasn't scary. The only thing scary is like the music and the pictures. Very well done though.
Number 3. When I was 22, I lived in a semi-hip, semi-sketchy part of Brooklyn, known as South Williamsburg. I lived in a 2-bedroom apartment with a lesbian roommate named Tony, who I didn't get along with very well, and I regularly went on dates with guys I met online. Most of these dates were nothing to write home about, but then there was the time I met Dave. Dave and I agreed to meet for a few drinks at my favourite bar, which was called Barcade. This bar was amazing because it had dozens of American microbrews on tap, and because the entire large space was filled with 80s arcade games, which were all still $1 a play. I'm talking Miss Pac-Man, Galaga, Space Invaders 1942, Tapper, Gauntlet, you name it. What I didn't realise is the decision to meet at this particular bar possibly saved my life. So I met him at Barcade, ordered a beer, cashed in $2 in quarters, and challenged him to a few games. We started out having fun, playing in turns and cheering the other one on. But after a few rounds of Punch-Out, he started getting antsy. A lot of, "Do you want to take this back to my place?" and "Let's get out of here," etc. I blew him off and didn't think anything of it at first, since I still had quite a few quarters left and just thought he was anxious to get into my pants. I finished my beer and ordered a second, which is usually my limit for sobriety, seeing as I'm quite small. Then my favourite game opened up. I excitedly ran for it, put a quarter in, and I sucked. I just couldn't time anything right. I kept missing my cues and didn't make it past the first round. This was weird, since I pretty much lived on this game, and beat anyone I challenged on it. When I mentioned with wounded pride that I'm normally not this bad after only one beer, he started to get even more incessant. "No, seriously, let's go. This place is too crowded for good conversation. Let's go somewhere quieter." I didn't understand, since we'd only been there for about half an hour, and I was interested in having some fun, but I also wanted to get to know him first. I again insisted on using my quarters, of which I only had 2 left. I put another one in the game, determined to kick some ass, and this time not only could I not make it past the first round, but I had trouble even holding onto my joystick correctly. This is when I started putting 2 and 2 together. I realised I was in a really bad situation, and I needed to play it cool, so I did what any normal 22-year-old would do. I excused myself to the bathroom, and proceeded to flip the fuck out. I called my roommate, and begged her to come and get me. We only lived a few blocks away, but she was at her girlfriend's house in Park Slope, about a 15-minute cab ride, and was in the middle of a date. I begged her and offered to pay for not only their date, but also the cost of the cab, and finally she agreed to come and get me. While I waited, I just hung out in the bathroom, getting more and more freaked out, losing more and more of my fine motor skills as the minutes went by. As women came into the bathroom, I kept asking them to check if he was still out there. For the first 20 minutes, he was. After that, people kept coming back and saying he was gone. I still didn't feel safe leaving the bathroom though. I stayed there, on the phone with my friend in North Carolina, waiting for Tony to show up. After an hour, she walked in and carried me out of the bar. I was able to walk with assistance, so it was more like a leaning carry if you can imagine that. She was still upset with me interrupting her date though, so instead of taking me back to the apartment, she took me to a gay bar nearby, the Metropolitan.
Oh, no.
I got parked on a chair for the next hour while she partied with some friends, I think. Honestly, my memory of this is a little hazy. I just know we were there. All I remember next is waking up in my bed in the middle of the night, but having crazy cramps and spasms all over my body, and not being able to control it. Then, I don't remember anything else until the next morning, where my only remaining symptom was a really bad headache. I never heard from Dave again, although I did get a phone call 2 days later from a blocked number, where a woman yelled curses at me for 30 seconds before threatening to kill me and hanging up. I don't know why, but I'm convinced the two events are connected. Either way, that's my story. I was drugged, but not raped.
Damn!
And I am forever thankful.
Fuck! That's crazy!
Number 4.
I grew up next door to this kid. He was a typical little boy, and I was a typical little girl. But we found common ground with less gendered toys like Lego and eventually PlayStation. We spent almost every afternoon together from age 3 to 12. My family moved to another state after that, and we lost touch. Even with the lens of childhood innocence in place, I feel the need to emphasize that his family were, give or take, normal and fairly affluent. Years went by. I'm in my 20s now. I usually ignore Facebook friend requests from people I don't see on a regular basis. But I made an exception for Luke, my childhood friend. He messaged me out of the blue and told me that he still lived in the same city, in the exact same house on the street where we grew up. That was a little odd, sure, but the memories came flooding back. Luke and I had a few conversations about Elder Scrolls and Marvel movies and Formula 1. His only profile pictures were of his car and his dog, and all his Facebook posts that I could see were about gaming, so I had no idea what he looked like and just figured we had stuff in common. The tone of our conversations changed. I wrote off the initial inappropriate comments as jokes, bad humour, and when it came to his flirting, I told him straight up that I wasn't looking to date or sleep around with anyone. He asked me out several times anyway and sent me a lot of Facebook event invites to parties at his house. He didn't seem to ever be inviting many, if any other women, just me and a bunch of guys. Basically, he had no idea how to make a prospective female friend feel comfortable or safe entering his social circle. There was no way I'd go over to his house, but eventually he wore me down with nostalgia and I agreed to catch up with him for a drink, as friends. The non-date rolled around on a Friday evening, pretty early. I waited to meet him on a busy street that we were both familiar with. There were a lot of bars in that area, so I wasn't worried we'd lack options. When Luke arrived, I suddenly understood why he didn't post pictures of himself on Facebook. For reference, I'm 5 foot, 98 pounds, only because I was an extreme skinny fat at the time. No muscle on me at all. Luke towered over me by at least a foot. I'm so close to the ground anyway that I have trouble estimating height. He was about 50 pounds overweight, and just a big guy in general, with a shaved head and covered in what looked like biker tattoos. I didn't want to judge on sight, since I have friends who are really into alternative fashion. I also know some metal fans with objectively scary tattoos, and they're the nicest people in the world. So, well, I was surprised but not freaked out. I couldn't identify the tattoos for what they were. Later this same night, he lifted his shirt to show me some more obvious ink. He takes the initiative and says he's leading me to his favourite place. It's a short walk and down some stairs to a bar that I don't recognise at all, and although it's a Friday night, the place is completely dead. We're the only people there, aside from the bartender. We order a couple of drinks and I don't let him pay for mine. When I'm out with friends, I always buy my own drinks, and I wanted to emphasise that this wasn't a date. Even if it had been, I would have paid for myself because I don't like accepting gifts on a first date. I want to sound out how I click with that person, and I don't want anyone to try and use a bar bill or a meal as leverage with me. It does happen. I don't want to owe strangers anything. Not a smile, not a conversation, nothing. I already wasn't 100% confident I'd even feel safe sipping this drink. Over the course of that one drink, Luke starts telling me his twisted values in detail. It turns out that those were genuine neo-Nazi tattoos, and one of the reasons he'd wanted to ask me out was because he knew my family and that we were, and I'm quoting here, really white. Then he started complaining about how the last girl he took out was part black and how he found out. You can probably guess that he didn't say black. I was beyond repulsed by this point. He was getting agitated just talking, without me saying much at all, and that was scaring me. Honestly, I did want to explode at him, but I know that anger makes people like him get even more hostile. I was afraid to fan the flames, so I kept the neutral and answered as calmly as I possibly could. I told him that I'm not a racist, if I can help it, that I didn't agree with him about any of this and I didn't know anyone who would, including his own parents. And I reminded him again that this was never a date. Then the double asshole, real prince of a guy, he says, "Girls always say no to me, until they say yes." I said in my own head, is this real? There's a part of me that thought it was all just a practical joke. We were at a booth, not sitting at the bar counter, so he was basically spouting all of his hateful shit with complete impunity. I had the sudden thought that if other people could only hear the crap coming out of his mouth, he'd get kicked out into a fine paste. I felt so alone. He'd set us up so that my handbag was under his jacket, on his side, next to him instead of next to me.
Bastard.
I would need to reach over him to get it and leave. I probably sat through an hour of him nursing that one drink, empty glass soon enough, and explaining his thoughts on life. In a way, it was just pathetic because his ideas didn't seem thought out, and you could tell no one usually listened to him for as long as I'd been listening. He couldn't begin to justify himself. He was getting worked up and aggressive in a way that's hard to describe. I wouldn't say he was getting off on making me uncomfortable, but there was probably something about having an audience who didn't seem to know how to shut him down or escape. I was thinking about exit strategies. I know you can't fight hate with hate, so I just kept telling him in a calm way that I'm completely disagreeing with him. He threw in a couple of dumbass points about feminism too, with the implication that I didn't have the right to contradict him. He also tried to make me confess to hating Indians, like he could bring me around to his way of thinking and then convince me to date him once we had that in common. Spoilers, we do not have that in common. That's when the touching started. He moved his hand up my arm and around my neck, and I shrugged him off. The second or third time I moved away from him, trying to touch my leg or anything around there, he just grabbed my arm and squeezed it, bruising almost, proving a point. That was the absolute last straw, and I knew I had to get away, no matter how badly he reacted. I think because I'd been so calm, he read my pulling away as shyness, and his idea of dumb girl modesty. He let me go to the bar to get another drink. I took my purse out of my handbag, just the purse, so I hoped he'd think that I wouldn't leave without the rest of my stuff, and beeline to the bar. I quickly explained the situation to the bartender, told him I was scared and asked if there was another way out or something. That was my second or third, or maybe fifth, huge mistake of the night. The bartender laughed in my face like it was the funniest thing in the world and said, "Just go, he probably won't follow you." So I had to leave by the front door, up the stairs in plain view from the booth, and run. I didn't look back at any point, but maybe the unhelpful bartender had a kind of point, since Luke either didn't follow me or wasn't able to keep up. Still, thanks for nothing, bartender. Looking back, I'm sure they were probably good friends actually. I blocked Luke on Facebook, but not before he got my number and he texted me every day until I changed it. I'm not proud of how I handled the situation. I don't think I did any of the right things or any of the smart things.
Shit, you're alive.
When I read stories about badass kids on this subreddit, I feel ashamed that I wasn't able to do better as a full-grown adult. I'm stronger now, and oddly I dealt with worse things before that night, but that one just took me by surprise. I thought it was weird enough to warrant submission here. I still don't understand how someone my own age, with every advantage I had and some that I didn't, could turn into that monster.
Good stories, man. The stories were good. I enjoyed them. They were not scary. I thought they were going to be scary. You know, it was a little bit spooky because of the ambiance and the video in the background. Other than that, pretty good stories. I'm kind of glad they weren't scary. I hate being scared. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to click the link down below. It'll lead you to this original video. As always, boy BlastphamousHD. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to comment, like, and or subscribe. Twisms. Make sure to check out my prank channel. I'm uploading 2 brand new pranks every single week, as this one you see on the left. Click the annotation if you want to watch that, or look in the description where I'll leave a link for the people who are on phones. And as always, BlastphamousHD out.